Hello everybody, I am doing a little series of videos about some of the basics of art journaling. So this first one is going to be what on earth is gesso and what should you use it for, when should you use it and why. You can get it in all sorts of different colours, black, white, clear. There are different brands of gesso. This is art by Marlene, this is Dina Wakley, Liquitex, Pebeo. There's so many and they all behave differently. So basically gesso helps you to prep your surface before you start to work. It's very similar to white acrylic paint. Let me just show you a little bit of it on my palette here. I'm going to put it onto that black. You can see there it's it just does look like white paint. This one by Liquitex is quite thin and it applies really smooth. It's lovely. It makes the surface that you put it onto slightly textured, so we call that giving it tooth. That just means that when you add other media to it, including variety of media on the same piece, it won't soak into the surface. The gesso does that and it prepares it for anything that you want to do. So once it's gessoed, anything that you add on top of that will just sit on top of the gesso. You can add it to just about any surface and then add paint over the top. Like I've said, you can get it in different varieties. So when would you use different varieties? Okay, so clear gesso. Basically, you would use clear gesso if you wanted to keep the colour of your background. For instance, in a craft journal like this, if you wanted this craft colour to show through, then clear gesso would be a great idea. The clear gessos that I've got, this one and this Liquitex one. This Liquitex one is quite grainy, so this is quite useful. You can use it over the top of acrylic paint, and then you can go in with coloured pencils, because normally they wouldn't work over the top of acrylic paint because it's plasticky and a little bit shiny. So it's good for that. Black one's just great for giving you a black background, and white, obviously you can use that to prepare a white background, and also you can use them on any background really. It just kind of depends what sort of effect you're going for. It has so many things that you can do with it. You can mix colours with it and create a tint. Let me show you. So I've got some white gesso here. If I pop a bit of red acrylic paint into there and then mix it in, it's going to create a really lovely pale tint of that colour. So you can mix it with paint. You can mix it with pigment sticks like Neocolor 2s or Dina Wakley Scribble sticks, distress crayons, distress pencils, any of those things you can mix with gesso, and you will create, like I said, a tint of that colour. There are different varieties that you can get. You can get student grade and artist grade. I think unless you're a professional artist, you don't really need to worry about artist grade. Although, to be fair, Dina Wakley's are all artist grade quality. I think sometimes that can mean they're more expensive, but I have to say Dina Wakley's ones are not pricey at all. Textures can vary a lot. Some of them are quite liquid, some of them are quite thick, and you can mix water into them to thin it down. So say you had a piece of canvas that you wanted to work on. If you painted it with gesso, it would take you forever. If you water that gesso down and then paint it on, it makes it much easier. So I'm just going to show you a couple of fun techniques that you can do with gesso before I stop this little video. So I'm going to use white gesso for this. I'm going to use the Dina Wakley one. And I'm just going to use this stencil from, actually I might use this one, from Kate Crane. I'm just going to show you this technique. So if I grab this white journal, so This is a watercolour paper. It's a very thick watercolour paper. The paints sink into it very, very quickly. So this page here, you can see I've got that kind of watercolour effect. I had to work very, very fast. If you added white gesso, you would still get that effect, but it would slow down the drying time a little bit too. So I'm going to use a sponge and sponge through the gesso here. Sponge through the gesso. Sponge through the stencil and just show you. You can use it as a resist. So I'm just going to go through here. It's quite difficult to see where you've been, but I think one of the things when you first start art journaling is there are so many words that you hear thrown about and you think, what on earth is that? And do I really need it? I think a good staple to buy is a white gesso, and you can pretty much use that for everything you want to start off with. So particularly if you're doing junk journaling, white gesso will help prep those surfaces that are maybe not normally readily accepting different medias and wet medias. You can't really see that on there, but I'm going to dry this. I am going to dry it if I switch my heat tool on. I'm going to dry it, and then I'm going to show you how that gesso will work as a resist. So all I've done is use the gesso through the stencil. I don't think there's any way I can make it so you can see that, but if I then go with a really nice turquoise, and I'm just going to water that down. So this is my colour here. I've made it a bit watery. This is acrylic paint. It's Dina Wakley's heavy body acrylic. That just means it's a bit thicker. So you can use the gesso to create a resist effect on your page. Can you see how that's coming through? So that is a really great way to use it. And you could layer lots and lots of patterns onto your background first, and then go in with different colours, gradients of colour. You can see I've got that pattern coming through. So that's because the gesso has sealed those areas where it's gone through the stencil, and it's going to stop the paint soaking in as quickly. So you can see this paint's soaked into the ungessoed paper really fast, and I can't really move that about much now. What's coming off is the residue that's in my brush. So because this paper is quite porous, it's very difficult to do anything after you've painted it. Whereas the gesso, that's fabulous. It's created that resist effect. And I could go in and use a darker colour if I wanted to. If I could find one that, oh, let's try Ocean. I don't need much, and again I'm just going to add a bit of water just to let that down, and it should still resist this. So cool. And there are so many things you could do with that now. You can go in and stencil over the top with other things, you can outline the pattern and use that as a nice first layer. So you've got that technique there. And then another thing that you can do with adding gesso to your page first. So I'm just going to grab a brush. I'm going to brush some gesso onto here. So this works white on white because the page is white, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not particularly worried about if it was in the craft journal, I'd probably use the clear gesso. So white gesso on here, although I have used white gesso in the craft journal as well. So I've just put a thin layer on. I haven't worried too much about going right to the edges. You can see there's a nice layer on. I'm going to give that a quick dry. Not quite. Okay, so I'm just going to grab some stencils so that I can show you this next technique. So this is called reductive stenciling or ghosting. People call it different things. This is a fun technique and it's one of my favourites. So if I can actually get any paint to come out, I'll show you this. So put some paint down. And the brush is a little bit wet actually, but never mind. And while it's wet, grab a baby wipe or a cloth. If you're using a baby wipe, make sure it's not too wet. Put your stencil on and then gently rub, and you can lift the paint off. And when you lift your stencil up, you will have some of the image left below. It is a fun technique. Let me show you again with a less wet brush because that was a bit soggy. Okay, so here you can see that's a bit better. And again, put my stencil down, lift the paint off. Now I'm not rubbing hard, and all that's happening here is that's lifting that paint off the surface. Okay, so that's called reductive stenciling. So if I dry that now, and then I can go in with another colour and do another layer. The stencils that I'm using here are from Natalie May Scrapbooking for this technique. Give this a good dry. So if I hadn't gessoed this paper and primed it, when I rubbed, it would have just rubbed the surface of the paper away. Okay, so now I'm going to go with a different colour. I haven't actually washed my brush, and I might just do a couple of areas here. And then I'm going to pop a different stencil on. Again, it won't rub away what I've already done because that's dry. If there's any areas where you think, don't like that, it's a bit harsh, you can just go in and give it a little rub with your baby wipe. Okay, so that is a couple of techniques that you can do using gesso. You can do a resist technique and the reductive stenciling technique. So I would say if you're starting out and you're going to do a bit of junk journaling, you know, using bits of recyclable post and things that come through the letterbox to make journals, white gesso is going to be your friend for that, because that's going to prep your surface so that you can throw lots of paint and water at it. And for journaling as well, I think white gesso is a good one to start off with. The myth of gesso, there we go, that's it in a nutshell, with a couple of techniques that you can do using gesso as well. So I hope this video has been helpful. There will be more coming, so keep an eye open for those. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Bye.